Greetings and salutations, YouTube, and welcome back to another episode of Jay Fixes Stuff. So today, as I mentioned in the last video, we have another snowblower project. Now, on this one, the gentleman said he bought it used 3 years ago, and it worked well for him. The first storm of this year, he said he was partway through clearing his driveway, and it just died, and he has not been able to get it going again since. So let's just take a look at this real quick. I have not looked at anything at all on this snowblower as of yet. So you are going to be seeing this right along with me for the very first time. All right, we have about a quarter tank of fuel. The fuel smells relatively fresh. And we are about 3/4 of the way up on oil, so it's safe to attempt to start it. It does look like well-used oil. I don't smell any fuel in it, so that's good. All right, so our discharge chute control is locked up. Let's see here. All right, that does move. That one moves, however, feels like too much tension. So we'll have to check that out. All right, so we have some funky looking augers in here. I'll have to show you later on. They're really big. I've never seen any like that. Granted, I don't really work on a whole lot of snowblowers. Oh, hey, I'm already seeing something that could be causing our problem. There is what looks like some kind of rope and beads wrapped all around that drive shaft. So it's definitely possible that could have gotten sucked into things and could have sheared the key on the flywheel. That's certainly a possibility. So we'll have to check that out. So I am guessing that we're not going to be able to start this, but let's give it a shot. So we have a key up here. We're going to put that into the on position. We'll turn the choke on. Put the throttle all the way up to the top. All right, hit that purge bulb a whole bunch of times there. And let's see what happens when we pull this thing. We do have compression. It sounds weird when pulling it though. It sounds like the auger is actually moving. It could be staying engaged, so we'll have to check that out. We'll give it one more pull here. Actually, let's try one more thing. I am going to run an extension cord out here, and let's try the electric start and just see if it does anything at all. What do you think? Is the electric start going to work on this thing? Hey! Outstanding. So it looks like we might just have a fuel issue along with a couple of other issues. All right, so as you can see, it's actually not in bad shape overall. There's a lot less rust on this thing than the last project that we did. This is a Toro 824, which means we have an 8 horsepower engine, most likely a Tecumseh. I haven't really looked into it yet, and a 24-inch clearing swath. Now these are those big weird augers I was telling you about. Looks really strange. And I'm not sure if the camera will pick this up here. If you can see that, there's our rope and our beads. So it looks almost like rosary beads, really big ones. All right. And as I said, that doesn't move. And this is the one with the weird tension on it. I kind of want to try to start that again. Let's try real quick. All right, so this time I have you set up so that as this thing is cranking, you'll be able to see the auger. So you'll have to let me know if that auger is turning when the engine is turning. All right, I just primed it a bit. Let's see if this thing wants to run again. Choke is on, throttle's all the way up, and keep an eye on that auger. All right, so that was a really good test. That told us quite a bit. So let me just share with you what I just found out in that brief couple of minutes here. First, if I turn the choke all the way off, it goes down for a dirt nap. It does not like that at all. If I try to put it on idle, like I just did, it goes down for a dirt nap. And this time it actually went completely off when I put it down into idle. Next, surprisingly, the auger, as you saw, it did work. I didn't want to do it too much because we do have that garbage that's wrapped around in there. So we definitely don't want to make that any worse. And then the other kind of issue that I saw here, well, actually two issues. The first is that our drive system is out of whack. When you put it into reverse 2, it flies backwards way faster than it should be. If you put it in first, it goes backwards just very slowly. If you put it into second, it just sits there as if it's in neutral. And then as you start going up to the higher gear settings, it does start to go forward. So we are most likely out of alignment there. The other issue is this handle on the left side is super loose. The right side doesn't feel too bad. It's a roughly normal play, slightly loose. Now, the final issue that I saw, and actually I noticed this as I was offloading it off of my carrier on my vehicle here. The guy actually loaded it in for me, so I didn't get to see this earlier. The belly pan, it's just dragging on the ground. And the self-tappers that hold it on there, yeah, they're missing. So if it's hanging on the ground like that, it's probably not just those 2 bolts that are missing. We probably have a number of them that are missing in order for that to hit the ground like that. So it initially, when it fired up, looked like it was going to be a pretty quick video, but we have quite a few things to address here. So there's hope for this thing. We definitely need to clean up the carburetor because it's running rough, doesn't want to stay running without choke on, and it definitely does not want to idle. So I guess that's about it. We'll find out the rest once we get it inside. All right, welcome back to the shop. So before we get started in here, I just want to quickly give a little shout out to a viewer. His name is Steve Smith. And in our last snowblower video, on that project, I had said that because I could not find my regular grease, I was using white lithium grease. Well, Steve pointed out that actually this is the perfect grease to use. White lithium grease is actually not only waterproof, but it's also designed for low temperatures. So it's actually the perfect grease for lubricating snowblowers. So just a thank you to Steve. Now, I'm not really sure where we should get started because we have a lot of work on this thing. I'm thinking, let's start with the obvious. That right there. And if you get in close, there's some really weird stuff wrapped around there. There's the big beads. There's also some kind of, I guess, zip ties and some kind of a block of wood and then big rope. All right, so let the slicing begin. Hopefully my finger is not on the menu. Matter of fact, let's get the finger out of there. I think for these zip ties, I'm actually going to use scissors. All right. Like, seriously, what were you doing with all these zip ties, dude? Runaway bead. Like, what? Like, what even is this? It's a block of wood on a rope with beads and zip ties. Like, what? Scissors are actually working better than the brand new razor blade. All right, so we got all that nonsense that was wrapped around that drive shaft out of there, and it was not causing any kind of a damage. It was just making a whole bunch of noise. So it is good that that is gone. All right, so our impeller is moving freely, which is turning the auger. So I think our auger is gonna continue working once we adjust it. So that's good. So while we're in here looking at this, I'm thinking maybe we should just check the gear oil level in this gearbox just to make sure we're doing okay. Yes, that can work. If at first you don't succeed, try a bigger wrench. There we go. Wow, that should not be that hard. But these big dumb augers sticking out like this are not making it any easier. All right, we've got to be getting close to the end of the threads here, so let's try to do it by hand. And if this is at the correct level, then we actually should see oil right there. So let's hope we are greeted with oil. We are not. All right, so we're going to have to add that to the list of stuff to buy. All right, so for now, I am just going to loosely tighten this back up finger tight, just so we don't have to go through that again to get that thing off. All right, so one issue down and a new one discovered. So no big deal. Now, I want to show you something else that I just found. So I have to say, I am really impressed with the condition of this snowblower. This is a 1997 model. That means it is 29 years old, and it looks amazing. The only rust that is on this thing that I've seen anyway is just that little bit down here, which pretty much every snowblower has, even new ones that are only a couple of years old, because that's kind of where the water just gathers and hangs out. So, but aside from that, it just needs a little bit of a bath. I mean, look at that beautiful paint underneath there. Almost 30 years old. It's just really amazing. So anyway, on to what I just found. Now, as I pointed out earlier, this right here, this worm gear, the worm gear with those teeth, when we turn this to rotate our discharge chute, it's locked up. It doesn't want to move. Now, initially, I thought it just needed to be maybe adjusted or lubricated, but I just saw this. As I pointed out earlier, this handle is wobbly on the left side. Now watch, it pushing that whole linkage forward, which in turn pushes this forward. And now watch this. If I put the handle to where it's supposed to be, and then we turn our crank, look at that. It works fine. So we should throw a little bit of lube on there, but that's actually not the issue. The issue is the handle here. The handle is not anchored properly. So we'll have to check that out when we get this thing up in the service position. Hopefully there's enough room to work on that, because usually there's gears and whatnot inside here, and you normally can't really get to the back side of these bolts, to the screws back there, because the gears are in the way. So that might be kind of a pain in the butt. But anyway, before we can put this thing up into the service position, we need to get the fluids out of it. So I guess we should do that now. All right, so the last snowblower project that we just did, it had pretty much the same engine. And when we did the oil change, when we drained out all the old oil, it took forever for that all to come out. And this does have the exact same setup with that cap on the bottom. So I think instead of waiting like half an hour for it to all drain out, we're gonna go back to the tried and true pneumatic siphon. So I shied away from it last time just because that filler tube is like a mile long, but we're gonna do that instead. All right, so let's maybe do a hybrid approach. Let's do as much as we can with the siphon, and then we'll pull the cap on the drain just to see what's left in there. So let's try that. All right, that actually went pretty quickly. All right, now let's see if anything is left by pulling this off. Oh, the whole tube is moving. Oh no. All right, plan B, let's grab the vice grips. Yep, vice grips for the win. All right, I'm just gonna hold a pan under here just to see if we get much out of here. All right, the siphon did a great job. Nothing is coming out. Actually, let's take this back off. On second thought, I'm gonna help out the next guy. We're gonna put some anti-seize in this thing so that that doesn't happen again. All right, anti-seize applied. Let's get our cap back on. And we'll whip up the excess a little bit. Because you don't want to get anti-seize on you. Because once it's on you, it's never coming off. It's kind of like glitter at a strip club, but I digress. All right, let's see if we can just move that threaded rod in a little tighter with the vice grips. There, that feels good. All right, so we have the oil out. Now it's time to either remove the fuel or to make it so it doesn't spill out all over the place. So let me just show you a trick on doing that. I checked out the gas and it does smell fresh and there is no water in there. So I think we're actually gonna leave this fuel in here. Yeah, it smells good. So anyway, I can't remember whether I had better luck using a sandwich bag or a shopping bag like so. So let's try them out and see which one works better. I'm thinking this is a little bit too thick, but I think it'll work. I know this works. I've done this, and I can't remember if I've tried the sandwich bag, but let's try that. All right, this is now in the service position, as you can see, and that was not easy. This thing is one of the heaviest snowblowers I've ever had to move around. Like, holy cow. It's even heavier than my errands over there. Jeez. Anyway, as you can see, it is stopping the fuel from coming out. So the sandwich bag worked. But if you don't have access to a sandwich bag, I know the shopping bag works as well. All right, so as I pointed out before, the seller was nice enough to abscond with our self-tapping bolts. So I did stop by my dealer and grab some of those. All right, so it looks like we have two more that are holding this on. So let's get those out of here. Probably be a little easier if I took the wheels off, but can't have everything be easy. All right, belly pan is off. So aside from some gunk on the gears here, which is just clinging to the grease that was on there, I can't really see anything that jumps out at me as being a problem under here. So that's good. All right, so let's put a little grease on this bar here. And as of the last project, you don't want to go overboard on this, because when this turns, if there's excess grease, it can fling off and land here on this friction plate. And you don't want that disc to have any kind of lube on it, because then your drive will end up slipping. All right, that side's good. Let's move it over a little bit. Ooh, it moves nice. All right, and let's see how that moves. So I'm going to move it down to first gear, which is right there. All right, and first gear should just be slightly to that side of the center of the disc. And let me get you in there so you can see it. As you can see, that is not to the left side of the disc. That is just slightly to the right. And while I have you in here, I'll just show you around a little bit. This actually has a really nice chain drive. You don't see a lot of that. Now, I very rarely read the manual, but I did on this one real quick, just because I haven't worked on a Toro snowblower before. And they actually say to use oil on everything. Not grease, but oil, including this chain. And I don't like the idea of oil flinging all over the place. All right, so rather than oil, like they call for in the manual, I'm thinking I'm gonna try this. This is actually by Dupont, and it's kind of a Teflon derivative, and it actually has ceramic technology as well. It's kind of a dry wax for chains. And this is usually kind of an expensive thing used for motorcycle chains. So let's give it a shot. All right, first let's cover up this friction disc. All right, we'll just do a little bit at a time here. Or a fire hose, whichever. All right, and that will, when it dries, it will cling right to it, and it's not going to fling off like oil will. All right, so now we want to calibrate this rod here so that our arm is moving this that way. All right, so we are looking to have first gear be just that way a bit. And in order to get that, we want this rod to be a bit further down, so basically a bit longer. So on most of the Toros, you actually take this rod off and then you have a threaded part down at the bottom that you can adjust. This one is a bit different. It's actually at the top up here. So we have to figure out how to get that pin out, and then we need to extend that rod, but I really don't feel a whole lot of travel available there. So this might be interesting. All right, we get the cotter pin out. And now we have to try to make this thing a bit longer. All right, so what we're gonna do is we are gonna spin this until it is a bit longer, until that is where on the disc we want it to be. So let's bring it around this way, counterclockwise. Let's see what that gets us. All right, let's go see where it is on the disc. That is to the left on the disc. So that's going to be pretty close. I think we want it just a little bit longer. Let's see if we can do one more turn. We don't have a ton of thread though. All right, let's see how that looks. Yeah, that looks better. All right, now let's try moving it to top speed, which I think is 5th gear. Let's just see where that lands. All right, that's 5th. What does that look like? Yep, that's towards the outer part of our ring. And actually, it looks kind of where that wear line used to be. All right, so we're not going to be able to know for sure if this fix is going to get us where we want. Let's try moving it over to reverse and see what that does for us. All right, that is R1. What does that do for us? All right, we are on that side of the center. And this is not precise because we don't have the cotter pin and the washers in right now, but it's getting us an idea. So we are at least on the right side of the disc now, so that's good. Let's check R2. That's over there pretty good. All right, so our gearing should now be correct as far as the position of that roller. Let me just try this engagement handle and see how far down. And if we look at the top, yeah, I think we're in good shape there. Our belts look really good. Pulleys look good. And looking over here, you can now see this is dried. So it is well lubricated if you watch it as it turns. Nice and quiet. It is lubricated nicely, but it's not flinging garbage off, and it is dry to the touch. All right, so it is the following day now, and I just want to go over a few things with you real quick. So on the bottom end down here, first, we have apparently taken care of the drive situation with our gears. We did lubricate what we could lubricate, cleaned up those gears, lubed that chain, we lubed that shaft there, so that looks good. All that's working well. So what we still have left down here, first, we had that issue with the auger where the auger felt way too tight when pulling the handle. And the other issue with the auger was that it kind of stayed engaged at a very slow speed after letting off. Now, it is possible that the brake pad down there, I don't know if you can see it right now, probably not. It's possible that that brake pad may have some issues. It doesn't appear to be worn, but I'm now thinking that it's really probably just the adjustment on the auger engagement lever. So I think we should try adjusting that and then test that. So that's probably something we're going to do soon. The next thing that I'm not happy about, but I can't really do anything about, is this here, this scraper bar. I've done the best that I could to correct it, but it's still far from perfect. I went to buy a new one actually, even though they were like $50, but they're no longer available. I looked everywhere. I checked new, I checked used, and I can't get it anymore. So this is imperfect. It kind of flares in a little bit even after all the work I've done on it. I've bent it out. It was all caved in before. It was all jagged. I ground it down a bit, and it's still imperfect. So I don't like having a project where everything isn't perfect and restored exactly the way that I would want it. So it's not sitting well with me, unfortunately, but I think that's probably the best we're going to get that. And it looks kind of like those skid shoes had been adjusted down. As you can see, they're really at the top of that travel. They were adjusted down probably to compensate for that blade not being perfect. So in the end, that may end up being okay. I don't like it. But anyway, and then the other final issue down on the bottom end here is the problem that we had with that handle being loose. And I don't know if you can see it from here, but this here, it's kind of sunken in a bit. And I don't know if there's much we can do about that. And I don't know if we're going to be able to tighten it up. I was hoping to be able to maybe add a washer or two there, but there's not really a whole lot of room there. So I'm going to have to look into that and see what I can do with that. But that's kind of where we are right now. So I guess for now, let's try to adjust that auger. So this is the auger engagement lever right here. And the shaft down below was bent a bit. So I fixed that. It's no longer rubbing on the handle when you engage it. However, this is not supposed to engage until it's like 2.5 inches into its travel of its 5-inch travel. So it's engaging as soon as you get to there. So we need to loosen that up a bit. And we do that by adjusting this right here. So we have the top half of the rod and the bottom half, and we should be able to back off that jam nut and adjust the other one. And basically we're looking to lengthen this whole thing so that it's not engaging so quickly. The other thing I'm just seeing here is it looks like the threads are clean to here. So it looks like somebody actually adjusted it at some point, and they probably over adjusted it. So that makes sense. All right, I think that'll probably be a good starting point, but let me just see how that lever feels. Hold on a sec. It feels better. Let's see how the disc is engaging down here. Yeah, that's much better. And that squeaking is driving me crazy. So this is a tight space, so I'm not thinking I'm gonna be able to show you much over here. So I probably will end up turning this off for a bit, but let me just check and see. I don't even know if I can get onto this thing because it's kind of sunken in a bit. And it looks a little rusted, so. And there's another one up there. That came off. All right, now the wheel is off, so hopefully that'll help a little bit. Holy cow, did I get it? I think I got it, guys. Holy crap! Now the question is, can I get that other one? Because that is really recessed on both sides, actually, too. Ooh. I might need to play the lottery today. I just got crazy lucky. Wow. All right, so I just repositioned things a bit and put that wood there just to hold that arm out of the way for now, just so you can see the carnage here. So I don't know if the camera is gonna really do this justice or not, but it is really egged out. It's like a reverse bullet hole that like blew it out through the side. So yeah, I'm gonna have to do a little reconstructive surgery here. All right, I guess I'm gonna turn you off while I figure out what I'm gonna do with this, and I'll check back in with you. Ladies and gentlemen, it is not often that I am proud of a fix, but I thought this one was pretty much a goner because this was just really, really, really bad, okay? And I was starting to think I'd have to get a whole nother frame for it or weld up some mending plates, and you really can't because there's no room with how close that gear is to it. But check this out. That was the good side over there before, and this was the side that was flopping all over the place. Check this out. It does not move at all anymore. And now, unfortunately, the good side, I mean, it almost makes me want to change that side and make it even tighter, but that was a lot of work getting that other side. So I'll have to see how it handles, but I don't know, I'm very happy now. All right, so now that we have that handle fixed, we should be able to make that work. But we're gonna have to get out of its service position in order to do that. So as you can see, there's a whole lot of joints and moving parts. There's like a U joint there and a U joint there. And then it comes through here and it goes to there. So yeah, we're gonna have to adjust things now that the handle is mounted in a different spot. So this right here, this bracket that holds that in place, I am thinking if we loosen this and then adjust that into place, that should affect that. So, but we can't really do that until we have the bottom end buttoned all back up again. So we'll have to wait for now, but now it's time to get that wheel back on. All right, so I have a little bit more progress to report. Hopefully you appreciate that I've been skipping over the boring parts. So you don't have to sit through all that. Okay, so first, the adjustment we did in the auger, it feels good. Also, I lubricated this so it's not making a squeaking noise anymore. Actually, I lubricated pretty much everything. Same thing with this one. That no longer makes a squeaking noise. And I tightened up this side now, so it barely moves over there. So it actually is structurally nice now. And best news of all, check this out. I hate those metal discharge chutes. They're so rattly. But anyway, look how nicely it moves now. So let me take you off the stand and give you a little bit of a tour here as far as what was causing that. So the issue here is that right on the inside of that, where it goes into that worm gear, right there, those two little tabs, when they're pulled out this way, make it so it won't rotate. So you need it to be in that position right there. So now it can rotate freely. So in order to achieve that, number one was getting the handles where they're supposed to be, which we did. And number two, I got to do a little smacking with a hammer. So I took a 3-pound sledge and I smacked this bracket back into place of where it should have been, which is that away. So by doing that, we then moved that rod forward effectively, putting that little tab or set of tabs through that bracket. So now the worm drive can move freely. So also, I was not planning on lubricating this and greasing it because my thought process was if dust and dirt land on that grease, it's going to accumulate there. However, I then thought about it and thought, hey, in the wintertime, there's not really a whole lot of dirt that's going to get stuck in there. It's just snow. So I checked the owner's manual, and sure enough, you are in fact supposed to put a waterproof, low temperature grease, just like this one, right exactly where it is. So I did that, and now it works really well. All right, so what do we have left? I have to do some cleaning, which of course I will not do on camera because that's boring. We have to address the fuel system, so we'll attack that in a little bit on camera. We have to get some oil back in this thing. And I think after we do all of those things, we'll be clear to get this thing outside and give it a test. Then we'll be able to find out if that auger adjustment was good, if the drive adjustment was good, and if it's going to work well. All right, so let's move on to the fuel system. Let's get this box off here and get the carburetor off. By the way, this carburetor box is actually designed to be taken off in the warmer weathers. So if you are blowing snow and it's 4 degrees or higher, you're actually supposed to take this off because it recirculates the heat off of the exhaust here so that the carburetor can pull it in. It's designed for use when it's colder. But if you are, for some odd reason, using a snowblower when it's over 40, you're supposed to take it off. All right, choke knob is off. All right, now let's see if it'll come off. And we're free. All right, so this looks like almost the exact same setup as the previous one. So it's like deja vu. And the end of that hose is ripped, so we're gonna have to clip that, make it nice, and put it back on afterwards. The rest of the hose feels good. Someone just tore the end of it. Yeah, that's fine. Oh, this one came off nice compared to last week's project. Holy cow. If you didn't tune in for that one, you should watch it. It was kind of a pain in the butt getting that one off. Last week's, I had no room between that discharge chute and this. Runaway nut. No, not me. That nut. Though I may run away. All right, so what do you think the chances are this gasket is going to stay intact? No, it's not looking good. The worst part is trying to scrape them off if they do rip. That is not fun. Yeah, it's definitely ripping. Ugh, that's gonna be a lot of work. Yeah. That is my biggest complaint about Tecumseh's. All right, and these clamp pliers were great last week, so I guess it deserves to get used again this week. All right, that clamp is back. Cool, and it just started leaking on me. Let's clamp it off. All right, I'm also gonna shut off the fuel shut off. All right, fuel is shut off. Now watch me forget about it. And then I'll be like, why won't this run? All right, let's see if we can get that hose off. All right, and we're free. Now let's see if the linkage will play nice. All right, as soon as I turn this, it's gonna dump fuel everywhere. Hey, there we go, we are free. Yeah, this is very similar to last week's, and it's rusted in the same metal bracket on top. I think it's a little different, but it's similar. Let's just see what comes out of the bowl here. Push that little release in the bottom. Oh, there's debris in there. The gas doesn't look terrible. And it smells relatively fresh. All right, I think we got the majority out of the bowl there. Oops. Yeah, you can see there's some sediment on the bottom. No water. It's not terribly fresh, but it's also not varnished, so this should have burned. And we did eventually get it to run, so I think it's mostly the carb, not so much the fuel. So, by the way, a couple things I forgot to go over with you. The first is when I went to replace the belly plate bolts, these self-tappers, these top ones were actually stripped, which is likely why the other ones fell out and why we didn't have them. So I'm guessing whoever was in here last just over-tightened the heck out of it and stripped out the holes. So I ended up having to buy larger self-tappers that are way bigger than they're supposed to be, and these work perfectly now. So the bottom ones, they're still the original. However, these are new ones that I put on myself. That's item one. Item two, I forgot that we still have to add gear oil to this, which brings me to this. This came in today. So the actual specified gear oil in the owner's manual that the OEM called for 29 years ago is no longer sold. So this is the closest thing that is available to what they originally specified, and I'm assured this will work fine. The annoying part is that they specifically went out of their way, Toro that is, to say, do not use synthetic. And almost every gear oil in this class that you buy is synthetic. So I had to go with this one. And finally, the last item, while I am somewhat confident that the adjustments we made to the auger control are going to stop it from spinning when it's not in use, I got an insurance policy. These are no longer carried by my dealer, or at least they're not currently in stock. So I had to go to another small engine shop, and he gave me this brake pad at cost. So we have a backup plan. If the adjustment didn't work, then we're going to change the brake pad. All right, so you can tell that this carburetor and the snowblower by extension is older than the one we worked on last week. It is a 1997 versus a 2002, so it's a 5-year difference, and that is evident here by the bowl here. If you look at the bottom, it actually has an adjustable main jet, so that's interesting. The one we did last week, it was kind of similar otherwise, but it did not have that adjustable jet on the bottom. All right, so let's get this off of here. And as you can see, my hands are a little steadier this week. Last week I'd had like 3 cups of coffee right before the video. This week, only 1 cup. All right, so these don't usually stick like that. That doesn't look bad at all. Although that is acting like water. I think we had water in there. Look at that. That's water. That is not gas. All right, so we had some water in that bowl. Interesting. All right, so I'm going to drop this bowl into the ultrasonic. All right, let's get that pin out of there. Wow, it's dragging. It's unusual. All right, needle looks good. Just stick that over there. Yep, that looks fine too, even though it was sticking when we were trying to get it off. And see, we're going to have to deal with all that nonsense, scraping that off, and getting it off of the intake manifold as well. And I think there's a good chance that I might have a gasket that'll work for that. Hopefully. All right, let's try pushing that emulsion tube down with a screwdriver, if I can get in there. No, that's the metal one. Yeah, that's metal. Those aren't removable. But on this end, it really looks like it is. Like I see O-rings, so that's really bizarre. But I do remember the older ones are not removable, so. All right, so now that we've confirmed that it isn't removable, there's really very little that there is to clean on this thing. So let me just see if I can get a file up inside there, just to make sure we're clear. All right, there's no obstructions. I'm gonna try a little smaller screwdriver. That's half. 1. So almost 1 1/4 in. So we will just throw that in to be cleaned. All right, so let's see how far this one is. Half, 1, 1 1/4. All right, so they both are 1 1/4. Yeah, it's clear. Yeah, that's totally clear. Ooh, that's rubber, so I really should have taken that off before getting carb cleaner on it. Oh well. Okay. Alright, so this is an actual Tecumseh carburetor tool. And I'm going to check and see if we have a seat that's removable here. And it feels like we do, and we do. Cool. So one last thing, I'll be shooting across the shop today. And if you watched my video last week, you would see that this smooth side goes away from the carb, and there's supposed to be a rib. I can barely see it. Maybe the camera can see it. But that rib goes towards the carb. All right, we'll set that over here. You don't want those to go through the ultrasonic because the degreaser can misshape them. All right, so I think we're just gonna blow a bunch of carb spray through this thing and then let the ultrasonic do what it will. Since this is not removable, I guess we'll start with that. So we'll let the ultrasonic loosen up the remnants of the gasket, and then we'll take a gasket scraper to whatever's left after that once it goes through the ultrasonic, and then a razor blade if necessary. See, that detent spring is barely touching it. That's why it felt different. But I can't really bend it back with that there. It's any better. Yeah, it adds a little resistance, and now we have notches. Cool. Usually you can't adjust these without taking out the whole choke plate. All right. I think that's pretty much all we can do to this thing. Just throw it in the ultrasonic. So usually I put the secret weapon of mean green in. However, it's been so cold, it's kind of frozen. So let's see if anything comes out. That's crazy. And we'll drop the float in just so we can watch it bounce around. All right, we're gonna put this thing in for 10 minutes at 60 degrees Celsius. Ultrasonic, do your thing. All right, so bowl cleaned up pretty nice, although it already was pretty decent. The carb itself cleaned up nicely. The actual metal part that was a little rusted, that's, you can't do anything about that. But the carb itself does look nice. So in addition to the throttle control over there, we also have an actual idle adjustment. And this engine does idle, so we may have to fine tune that a little later. And I checked my service manuals while we were waiting for the ultrasonic to do its thing, and I confirmed that on these old school carbs, they do in fact do 1.5 turns out as a starting point, and then you just fine tune them as necessary. And an O-ring just fell out of the pilot jet area. So that's strange. Let's pop that back in. If I'd known that was removable, I would have taken that out before putting it in the ultrasonic. All right, so that's a shallow one. So that looks good. All right, so I guess we might as well get that needle back in. So I want to lightly seat it, then turn it back 1.5. All right, so that's seated. That is 1/2. Right there. That's 1. And 1.5. All right. Let's get this back in here. That looks nice. All right. All right, so I believe that is lightly seated right there. Yep, right there. So we'll do half, 1, 1.5. All right, so our needles are set. Now let's put a little bit of oil on that seat. By the way, this is the Tecumseh carburetor tool from last week's video. I will link that in the description for you in case you want to get one. And I do this just to help it seat a little bit better. All right, there we go. All right, so on these, you want to have that ribbed side. See a little like ridge there? You want to have that in towards the carb. There we go. And you'll feel its seat when it's where it's supposed to be. And then you just want to double check it and make sure. Yep, we're good. Let's get our gasket back on here. And that gasket looks fine. And this is adjustable, by the way. If you need to adjust the float level, you can bend that tab up or down. This just hangs on it like so. All right, so you want to have that parallel to that. So that is in need of adjustment. So you can reach back in there and just push down on that tab until you get it where you want it. Ooh, I think that's pretty close. Let's try that. Perfect. Almost. No, just a hair more. Yep, perfect. All right. Now let's just verify that it is sealing. Once we get the pin the rest of the way in there. There we go. All right, that seems to be sealing well. So let's get that on there. And you want that half circle to line up with that half circle right there. And you want it to be even. There we go. And while you're tightening this down, you want to make sure you don't bump that adjustment. And this is a 7/16. Okay. There. All right. One reassembled prehistoric Tecumseh carburetor. All right, so this looks like it's going to be the right one. Tecumseh part number 26756. Let's crack this thing open and see if it's the correct one. All right, let's see. Yeah. And that, my friends, is why I stock way too many things, because you never know when you might need it. And I forgot to get the rest of the gasket remnants off of here. Wow, that just came off really easily. I need to play the lottery. Those always fight me. All right, let's get that linkage on. Okay, linkage is on. Let's get the fuel line back on. That's on there. There we go. Nice. All right, I think I might have got it on there. Let's see if I can get it in. Hey, I got it started. Okay. That back one is the harder one because you can actually see what you're doing on the front one. All right, they're both started. Let's bring back the impact. Okay. Carb is on nicely. Okay, so that looks like it is sticking a little. Yeah, it's loosening up, but it's sticking. So let's hit it with a little PB blaster. There we go. Did I say a little PB blaster? Because I meant a lot of PB blaster. All right, now we have a functional throttle control. All right, now one project is just running into the next, and I can't remember. I know we changed the spark plug on the previous Snowblower project, but I can't remember if we checked this one or not. So let's do that. Ooh, that was loose. The outside is a little oxidized. That doesn't look bad. Gap looks decent. Let's double check it. Yeah, it's a good 30. I think that plug's fine. Yep, RJ19LM Champion. And it's nice and shiny, so I think that should be fine. Yeah, whoever put that on never crushed the crush washers. Okay, that feels good. All right, I think we're good to get this housing back on. So we're just gonna do this. There we go. Okay, carb box is back on. And now we just need to put that choke knob back on. So the fuel system is now officially back together. All right, let's get some oil back in this thing. And if I remember correctly, these Tecumseh 8 horse are about 26 fluid ounces, which works out to be just under 800 milliliters. And on these engines, you're actually supposed to screw them in. On most engines, you just seat them lightly like that and then check them, but this one it actually wants you to turn it in, which really isn't much further anyway, but just so you know. And we're just barely over full, so that's fine. All right, now we need to get some gear oil inside that gearbox because we are low. And I'm getting tired of using a crescent wrench on these square bolts, so I ordered a square bolt wrench, which has not arrived yet. All right, so on these, we want to add oil until it overflows. All right, perfect. All right, that's on there good. All right, so there is fuel in here, but I just want to top it off with some new fresh ethanol-free gas because we're going to be doing a test at some point. So we filled up the fuel, we filled up the oil, we filled up the gear oil in that gearbox. So I cannot get this outside right now because it's really late at night, although I really do want to test this thing. So at this point, I think all we're going to be able to do is simply see if we can get this dialed in. Now, in retrospect, I probably should have left this carb box off. While they were cool enough to leave a little hole in the side to get to that adjustment screw there, and the other one you adjust by hand down below, it's still not super convenient. The other thing is I have this thing up on the lift table, which is making it awkwardly high to try to pull it. So I think just for us to check and see how the engine is dialed in, to see if we can get this thing started and to see if it will idle now, I think we're going to use the electric start. And I just want to see if the engine is dialed in. And then we'll do the rest of the actual testing tomorrow. So, choke is on. We're at full throttle. All right, let's give it a shot. What do you think? Is this thing going to fire up and run? Spoiler alert, that's a no. All right, let's double check everything here. We have the fuel turned on. We have plenty of fuel. The fuel line is hooked up. I did take off the clamp. The choke is on. The fuel is all the way up. The throttle is all the way up. Let's try it again. Oh, what a moron. Okay. So as it turns out, if you turn the key on, yeah. Let's try it again, shall we? I think this thing's actually pretty close, surprisingly. I think we need to turn in that idle screw a little bit, though. Let me see if I can get to that with that carb box on. All right, so unfortunately, the carb box had to come off. This is the idle set screw right here. And it's actually turned almost all the way out. So, yeah, that's why our idle was too low. All right, let's try this again. Choke is on. We forgot to put that airline back on, so let's do that real quick. That is back on. All right, let's try it again. I don't think we need choke this time. All right, so I have set my carbon monoxide detectors. I have aired it out. We are back down to 0 and we are good to keep going. Now, as you can see, that was an absolutely awesome test. It started right up, it ran great, and I was able to get that engine dialed right in, and it is purring. So I cannot wait to get this thing outside to give it a test. So we will do that in the morning. All right, boys and girls, as you can see, it is the next morning. This is gonna be a very fast test because it is currently 13 degrees below 0 with the wind chill. So hopefully this thing will start right up for us. It has been sitting out in that cold shop all night, however, where it was below 0. So if it does start right up without the electric start, I will be surprised. So let's see what we can do here. All right, we're up to full throttle. Choke is on. The silly key is turned on this time. Let's give it some primes. All right, let's see if this thing will start or if we need to use the electric start. Here we go. Ooh. No way. Choke is completely off now. Outstanding. This thing just did great. We started off with nothing but problems with this old girl. We couldn't even get her to start at first. We had to use the electric start just to get this thing to limp along. And then it wouldn't run without choke. And it also didn't want to idle. Now this engine purrs. We started off with an auger with stuff all wrapped up inside of it. And it was all out of adjustment. That's all taken care of. And then the auger wouldn't disengage. We took care of that problem. It now works perfectly. The drive system, it was all kinds of wonky. It was going backwards when you're trying to go forwards. And then when you put it in reverse, it just flew backwards. It now is working exactly as it should. This is going to make someone a great snowblower. So I want to thank you for stopping by and hanging out. We'll see you next time.